Imagine a country that has never sought conquest, yet boasts one of the most powerful armies in history. Picture a nation devoid of gold mines, a coastline, or vast, fertile plains, yet consistently ranks among the wealthiest in the world. Envision a place where 4 languages are spoken, yet unity has been preserved for 7 centuries. What makes Switzerland so extraordinary? How did this small mountain nation manage to withstand the might of Europe's greatest empires? Why did revolutionary ideas, from Protestantism to the Red Cross, emerge within its borders? Lastly, how did a state that remained neutral during the world wars become the keeper of secrets for all warring factions? The story of Switzerland is not merely a timeline of events. It is a captivating narrative of how nature shapes humanity and how humans, in turn, mold institutions. It illustrates how a small nation lacking natural resources transformed into a hub of global diplomacy, finance, and innovation.
Friends, be sure to subscribe to my Quiet History channel, and leave a comment of at least 7 words. This is necessary for the channel to function. Share this video with others if you think it's important. Thank you.
This intriguing saga begins long before the very concept of Switzerland came into existence. Imagine the majestic Alps 15,000 years ago, as the last ice age was drawing to a close. Massive glaciers that had blanketed the mountains for centuries were slowly retreating, leaving behind deep valleys and crystal-clear lakes. In this harsh yet breathtaking landscape, the first humans began to appear. They were unaware that they inhabited what would one day be known as Switzerland. To them, it was merely land nestled between towering peaks, a place where they could hunt mountain goats and forage for berries. These early settlers were nomadic, following the seasonal migrations of animals. They did not build permanent homes, opting instead for temporary shelters in caves and under rocky overhangs. Even then, they were compelled to adapt to the unique conditions of the mountainous terrain. Each tribe developed its own survival techniques, creating rituals and beliefs inspired by the grandeur of the mountains and the unpredictability of alpine weather. Archaeologists have uncovered remnants of these ancient people in the depths of the alpine caves. Stone tools, animal bones, and even primitive ornaments narrate the story of those who inhabited this land long before the advent of written language. One of the most astonishing discoveries is Ötzi, the Iceman, found in 1991 on the border between modern-day Italy and Austria. Although Ötzi was not discovered on present-day Swiss soil, his existence provides invaluable insight into the lives of alpine inhabitants around 5,300 years ago. Picture a man approximately 165 centimeters tall, clad in garments made of leather and fur, with footwear meticulously designed for traversing rocky slopes. He carried with him a copper axe, a flint knife, a bow, and arrows. His body bore tattoos, which may have held ritual significance or served as a primitive form of acupuncture to alleviate joint pain, a common ailment for those living in such rugged terrain. While Ötzi and his contemporaries were engaged in the struggle for survival high in the Alps, the valleys of what would become Switzerland were beginning to witness the establishment of the first permanent settlements. Around 5,000 years ago, people learned to construct stilt houses along the banks of alpine lakes. This culture of stilt houses, as archaeologists call it, has left remnants that have endured to the present day, earning a spot on the UNESCO World Heritage List. Imagine a village comprised of several dozen houses perched on wooden stilts above the lake's surface. This unique positioning protected residents from predators and enemy raids while providing easy access to water and fish. The people inhabiting this culture had already begun engaging in primitive agriculture, cultivating wheat and barley and raising livestock, cows, sheep, and goats. They crafted ceramic vessels, wove clothing from flax and wool, and created decorations made of stone, bone, and even metal. Metallurgy arrived in what would become Switzerland around the 4th millennium BCE. Initially, it was copper, a relatively soft metal used for crafting simple ornaments and tools. Then, around 2500 BCE, people discovered how to alloy copper with tin, resulting in bronze, a harder and more durable material. The Bronze Age ushered in new technologies, a more complex social structure, and an expansion of trade networks. Picture caravans of merchants traversing perilous alpine passes, transporting tin from distant Britain, amber from the shores of the Baltic Sea, and shells from the Mediterranean. During this time, the mountain passes through the Alps became crucial trade arteries connecting northern and southern Europe. Control over these routes would play a pivotal role in Switzerland's history for centuries to come. By approximately the 8th century BCE, the Iron Age had arrived in the Alps. This new metal was stronger than bronze, and importantly, the raw materials for its production were more readily available. Iron tools enabled the clearing of forests for fields and pastures, the construction of sturdier homes, and the creation of more effective weaponry. At this time, various tribes belonging to Celtic culture inhabited the future territory of Switzerland. The Celts were not a singular nation in the modern sense. Rather, they represented a collection of tribes united by shared cultural traits and linguistic similarities. Among the Celtic tribes residing in present-day Switzerland were the Helvetii, Sequani, and Rorians. They constructed fortified settlements on hills while engaging in agriculture, crafts, and trade. The Celts were skilled metalworkers, creating exquisite iron and bronze artifacts adorned with intricate patterns. Picture a Celtic warrior, tall and imposing, with long hair often dyed in vibrant hues using lime, sporting a mustache but no beard. His body was marked with tattoos and war paint, and his attire consisted of a checkered tunic, woolen trousers, and a cloak fastened at the shoulder with a bronze brooch. Armed with a long iron sword, spear, and a shield embellished with metal fittings, he wore a golden torque around his neck, a symbol of status and wealth. Celtic society was hierarchical. At the top stood the warrior aristocracy, followed by priest druids, the keepers of knowledge and religious traditions. Below them were free commoners, farmers, herders, and craftsmen. At the bottom were slaves, prisoners captured during wars, or debtors unable to repay their creditors. Celtic religion was polytheistic, with numerous gods and goddesses representing natural forces. A particularly revered aspect of their belief system was the cult of heads. They believed that the soul resided in the head, leading them to honor sacred springs, groves, and lakes, where they conducted rituals and offered gifts to their deities. Druids served as priests, judges, and guardians of tradition and knowledge, passing down their wisdom orally, eschewing written records. Life for the Celts in the Alps remained relatively tranquil until a new force began to loom from the south: the Roman Republic. In 58 BCE, Julius Caesar, appointed as the proconsul of Gaul, faced a mass migration of the Helvetii. This Celtic tribe, which inhabited the territory of modern Switzerland, decided to leave their lands in search of more fertile regions in Gaul. Why did the Helvetii choose this daring migration? The stage was set for a clash between two powerful cultures, one that would shape the destiny of the region for centuries to come. What drove Julius Caesar to expand his empire into the territories of the Helvetii? How did the cunning leadership of their chief, Argestorix, persuade his people to embark on such a desperate journey? The story unfolds in the heart of ancient Gaul, where the Helveti's struggle for survival led them into a monumental clash with the might of Rome. This confrontation set the stage for a remarkable transformation of culture, society, and religion in the region we now know as Switzerland. In his writings on the Gallic Wars, Caesar describes how the Helvetii were convinced to relocate, driven by a desire for a more favorable existence. The Romans swiftly incorporated Helvetii lands into the province of Gaul and eventually carved out a separate province named Helvetia. With their arrival, the Romans brought a wave of cultural change. Language, laws, technologies, and urbanization took root. Envision the Romanization of Helvetia, where once stood Celtic settlements, magnificent Roman cities sprang up, boasting characteristic layouts. Straight streets intersected at right angles. A forum graced the center, alongside temples, basilicas, theaters, and public baths. Venticum, present-day Avanches, emerged as the capital of the province, evolving into a vital administrative and cultural hub, home to approximately 20,000 inhabitants. Other prominent cities included Augusta Raurica, Augst, Vindonissa, Vindisch, Lausanne, Geneva, and Turicum, modern-day Zurich. The Romans constructed roads that linked these cities with one another and the wider empire, while bridges spanned rivers and aqueducts delivered fresh water into urban areas. In the countryside, villas and large estates thrived, owned by Roman citizens or Romanized Celtic nobility, specializing in the production of grain, wine, olive oil, and wool. As time passed, the local populace gradually adopted the Roman way of life. The Celtic nobility led the charge in embracing Roman culture, learning Latin, and adopting Roman fashions, customs, and names. Their children received Roman education and became full citizens of the empire. In contrast, the common people were slower to embrace Romanization, often retaining their Celtic language and traditions, especially in remote, mountainous regions. The Romans also introduced their polytheistic religion, erecting temples dedicated to Jupiter, Mars, Apollo, Minerva, and Mercury throughout Helvetia. Interestingly, a process of religious syncretism took shape, whereby local Celtic deities were equated with Roman gods. For instance, the Celtic god Tyrannus became identified with Jupiter, while Teutates was associated with Mercury and Isis with Mars. This blend gave rise to hybrid cults that married elements from both traditions. As the early centuries of our era progressed, Christianity began to penetrate Helvetia. Initially, this new faith spread among the urban poor and slaves, gradually encompassing all layers of society. By the end of the Roman period, Christian communities had established themselves in the province, with bishops leading in major cities. Helvetia's economy became integrated into the broader imperial system, exporting cheese, honey, wax, hides, and timber, while importing wine, olive oil, ceramics, glass, and jewelry. Crafts and industries flourished, including pottery, metallurgy, and weaving. Coins were minted in Aventicum and other cities. The first 2 centuries of Roman rule were marked by peace and prosperity, known as the Pax Romana. However, by the 3rd century, the empire entered a period of crisis. Increased barbarian incursions, civil wars, economic turmoil, and epidemics took their toll, and Helvetia was no exception. Cities were fortified with walls, populations dwindled, and trade faltered. The pressure from Germanic tribes on the northern borders of the empire intensified. The Alemanni, an East Germanic tribe, launched frequent raids on Helvetia and began to settle in certain areas. In response, Roman authorities attempted to halt the onslaught by building fortifications and hiring barbarians as federate troops. A significant event occurred in the 4th century when Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity, which subsequently became the state religion of the empire. In Helvetia, as in the rest of the empire, the construction of Christian churches commenced, often on the sites of former pagan temples. Bishops grew into important figures in both religious and political spheres. By the 5th century, the Western Roman Empire found itself in a deep crisis. Its resources were depleted, the military weakened, and provinces fell one after another under the sway of barbarian kingdoms. In 401, the Visigoths invaded Italy, forcing Roman legions to withdraw from Helvetia to defend the heart of the empire. The province became largely defenseless in the face of barbarian assaults. By the 450, Helvetia exited Roman control, with its western part succumbing to the Burgundians and the eastern to the Alemanni. Thus, the Roman period of Switzerland's history came to a close, ushering in a new era, the early Middle Ages. The Burgundians, an East Germanic tribe, established their kingdom in the Rhone Valley. They were relatively Romanized, adopting Christianity in its Arian form before ultimately converting to Catholicism, and coexisted peacefully with the Gallic Roman population. The Burgundian kingdom, with its capital in Geneva, stretched across the western part of modern Switzerland and into parts of contemporary France. In contrast, the Alemanni remained less Romanized, clinging to paganism until the 7th century, bringing with them their Germanic language, which would form the basis of modern Swiss German. They settled in the northern and eastern regions of present-day Switzerland, displacing or assimilating the Gallic Roman populace. Imagine this transitional era. Roman villas in the countryside lay abandoned or transformed into fortresses. Cities shrank, often limited to the area around the former Forum and Christian Basilica. Long-distance trade dwindled, and the economy became more localized and subsistence-based. Latin continued to serve as the language of the church and administration, but in everyday life, new Romance dialects emerged, and the Germanic tongues of the newcomers spread. By the 6th century, the territory of modern Switzerland found itself under the influence of a new force, the Frankish kingdom. In 534, the Franks, led by Theodoric, son of Clovis, conquered the Burgundian kingdom. By 536, they had subjugated the Alemanni, bringing nearly all of present-day Switzerland under the rule of the Merovingian dynasty of Frankish kings. The Franks introduced a new system of governance. Territories were divided into counties, governed by counts, royal officials who combined administrative, judicial, and military duties. Large landholdings were granted to royal favorites as benefices, conditional holdings for which the recipient was obliged to provide military service. During this period, the region underwent a complete Christianization. Irish and Scottish monks, such as St. Columbanus and St. Gall, established monasteries that became centers of Christian outreach and education. The Abbey of St. Gall, founded in the year 612, emerged as one of the most significant cultural centers of early medieval Europe. Here, ancient manuscripts were copied, and arts, sciences, and crafts flourished. In the mid-8th century, the waning Merovingian dynasty gave way to the Carolingian dynasty. Under Charlemagne, from the years 768 to 814, the Frankish kingdom evolved into an empire, encompassing much of Western Europe. The territory of modern Switzerland became part of this empire. Charlemagne implemented administrative reforms, strengthened central authority, and promoted education and culture, ushering in what is known as the Carolingian Renaissance. He organized an effective system of governance through a network of imperial estates, fiscals, and monasteries. Counts were now required to regularly report to special royal envoys known as missi. After Charlemagne's death, the region continued to experience significant changes that would shape its future. What if I told you that a fierce battle in the early 14th century changed the course of European history? How did a band of determined Swiss peasants rise to defeat the elite knights of the Habsburgs? And what role did the legendary Arnold von Winkelried play in this dramatic tale of resistance and resilience? Today, we delve into the story of Switzerland's struggle for autonomy and the creation of a unique confederation that would ultimately reshape the region. In the aftermath of the Treaty of Verdun in 843, the once mighty Carolingian Empire began to fracture. The territories that would later become Switzerland were divided among three grandsons of Charlemagne. The western regions fell under the control of Lothar's Middle Kingdom, while the eastern portion was governed by Louis the German, ruler of the East Frankish Kingdom. As the 9th and 10th centuries unfolded, Europe faced relentless Viking raids, leading to the establishment of mutual aid alliances known as the Ewigkeitsbund among local communities for defense against external threats and for resolving internal disputes. Interestingly, the early treaties recognized the canton's allegiance to the Holy Roman Empire, indicating that full independence was still a distant aspiration. But what drove these mountain communities to form such alliances? The territories that would later comprise the forest cantons occupied a strategically significant position at the Gotthard Pass, the crucial passage that connected northern Italy with Germany. The opening of this vital route in the 13th century heightened the region's importance, attracting the attention of powerful feudal lords, particularly the House of Habsburg. The Habsburgs, whose ancestral holdings were located in what is now Switzerland, specifically the Habsburg Castle in Aargau, sought to exert control over the Alpine passes. However, the inhabitants of the mountainous valleys, who were accustomed to a degree of autonomy, resisted these encroachments. They received the privilege of imperial immediacy from the Holy Roman Emperor, meaning they answered directly to him and bypassed intermediary feudal lords. When Rudolf of Habsburg was elected emperor in 1273, the residents of the forest cantons grew increasingly apprehensive that he would use his new power to expand his lands at their expense. These fears intensified after Rudolf's death in 1291, ushering in a period of interregnum, during which the cantons forged an alliance to safeguard their freedoms. The first major test for this nascent confederation came in 1315. Duke Leopold, the first Habsburg, intended to subjugate the rebellious mountain dwellers once and for all. He assembled a formidable knightly army and marched toward the territory of Schwyz. On November 15, 1315, a decisive clash erupted near the village of Morgarten, pitting the Habsburg forces against the Confederate militia. Picture this intense confrontation, a narrow road winding between a rocky slope and a lake, where heavily armored cavalry, pride of feudal Europe, made their advance, confident in their superiority. Then, from the mountains above, a torrent of stones and logs cascaded down, smashing into the front ranks of the Habsburg knights, throwing their formation into chaos. Panic ensued as the knights struggled to regain control. At this critical moment, Swiss militia, armed with halberds and simple peasant weapons, emerged from the forest. They charged at the demoralized knights, who found it impossible to maneuver in the constricted terrain. The result was a staggering defeat for the Habsburg army. The victory at Morgarten held immense psychological importance. For the first time, common farmers and townsfolk had triumphed over a military force once deemed invincible. This success not only bolstered the Confederates' confidence, but also attracted the attention of other cities and communities aspiring for independence from feudal oppression. In December of that same year, just a month after the battle, the three cantons renewed their alliance by signing the so-called Brunnen Treaty. Unlike the earlier agreement of 1391, this new document did not mention any subordination to the Holy Roman Empire. This marked a significant step towards full independence. Over the following decades, additional members joined the alliance: Lucerne in 1332, Zurich in 1333, Glarus and Zug in 1352, and Bern in 1353. Together, they formed the League of 8 Cantons, known as the Old Confederation, or Alte Eidgenossenschaft. Each new member had its own reasons for joining the coalition. For instance, the imperial city of Zurich entered the alliance following a guild revolution that overthrew the pro-Habsburg patricians. Bern sought allies to support its expansionist policies to the west. However, the common thread uniting them all was the desire for autonomy and protection against the encroachments of powerful feudal lords. This confederation was not a unified state in the modern sense. Rather, it functioned as a military-political alliance of independent entities. Each canton maintained its own internal structure, laws, and customs. Decisions on common issues were made at assemblies known as Tagsatzung, where each canton had one vote, regardless of size or population. The internal organization of the cantons varied significantly. The forest cantons operated as rural democracies where all free men participated in general assemblies, known as Landsgemeinde, electing officials and passing laws. In contrast, urban cantons like Zurich, Bern, and Lucerne had more complex governance systems that incorporated elements of oligarchy, where power resided with guilds or patrician families. As the 14th century progressed, the Confederation continued its struggle against the Habsburgs. In 1339, the Swiss achieved victory at the Battle of Loppen. In 1386, another significant confrontation, the Battle of Sempach, unfolded, where, according to legend, hero Arnold von Winkelried sacrificed himself by throwing himself onto the spears of the Austrian knights, creating a breach in their ranks for his comrades to exploit. The military successes of the Confederates can be attributed to several factors. First, they utilized the advantages of their terrain: mountains, forests, and narrow roads, where heavily armored knights could not navigate effectively. Second, they developed new tactics, including formations that resembled columns or carriages, with long pikes positioned at the flanks to counter knightly charges. Third, they innovated weaponry, such as the halberd, which combined the functionalities of a spear and an axe, proving ideal for combat against cavalry. By the end of the 14th century, the Habsburgs were compelled to acknowledge the de facto independence of the Swiss Confederation. In 1389, a peace treaty was signed in which the Austrian dukes renounced their claims to Swiss territories. The 15th century heralded a period of territorial expansion for the Confederation. The cantons began to conquer new lands that became their joint possessions, or gemeine Herrschaften, often at the expense of neighboring feudal territories. Particularly active in this expansion were Bern and Zurich, who sought to increase their territories. In 1415, the Swiss launched an incursion into Ticino, an Italian region located on the southern side of the Alps. The Duke of Milan was forced to concede control over the Leventina Valley to them, marking the Confederation's first conquest beyond Swiss borders. However, this expansion led to conflicts between the cantons themselves. From 1436 to 1450, the Old Zurich War erupted, a violent struggle between Zurich and the other cantons over the inheritance of the last Count of Toggenburg. Zurich even allied with the long-standing adversary of the Confederation, the Habsburgs. Ultimately, Zurich faced defeat and was compelled to rejoin the Confederation. In the mid-15th century, Switzerland confronted a new threat: the ambitions of Charles the Bold, Duke of Burgundy. Seeking to establish a powerful state between France and the Holy Roman Empire, he found himself at odds with the Swiss over the city of Mulhouse and several territories in the region. In 1476, the pivotal Battle of Murat occurred, one of the key encounters of the Burgundian Wars. The Swiss infantry decisively defeated the Burgundian army, which had been considered one of the strongest forces in Europe at that time. This victory not only solidified the Confederation's reputation, but also showcased the determination and resilience of the Swiss people, as they fought for their independence and crafted a unique identity that would endure through the centuries. What happens when a powerful duke meets his demise on the battlefield? How does the reputation of Swiss mercenaries soar, transforming them into the elite soldiers of Europe? And what radical changes does a reformer like Ulrich Zwingli bring to the religious landscape of Switzerland? These questions take us on a journey through the tumultuous history of Switzerland, where battles for independence and ideological confrontations shape its identity. The downfall and death of Charles the Bold at Nancy in 1477 catapult Swiss mercenaries into the spotlight, earning them accolades as the finest infantry in Europe. Their military reputation quickly captures the attention of European monarchs, leading to an unprecedented demand for their services. Notably, the French king, Louis XI, seizes the opportunity, solidifying a long-lasting military alliance through a perpetual peace treaty with the Swiss Confederation in 1481. This agreement essentially grants him a monopoly on Swiss mercenaries, turning their service in foreign armies into a vital source of income for the urban guilds and educated citizens of the Swiss towns. In the realm of religious reform, Zwingli's initiatives proved to be even more radical than those of Martin Luther. He vehemently rejects not only indulgences and the veneration of saints, but also the Mass, monastic life, church hierarchy, and ecclesiastical art. Churches undergo a profound transformation as they are stripped of icons, statues, and altars, ushering in a new form of worship characterized by sermons, prayers, and the singing of psalms. The secularization of church property ensues, leading to the closure of monasteries, with their lands repurposed for the establishment of schools, hospitals, and shelters. By 1528, the city of Bern, the most powerful canton in the Confederation, aligns itself with the Reformation, followed by Basel, Schaffhausen, Glarus, and Appenzell. However, the forest cantons, Uri, Schwyz, and Unterwalden, along with Lucerne, Zug, Fribourg, and Solothurn, remain staunchly loyal to Catholicism. This religious schism ignites tensions within the Confederation, leading Protestant and Catholic cantons to form separate alliances and prepare for conflict. The First Kappel War erupts in 1529, ending bloodlessly with a peace treaty that guarantees religious freedom. Yet, the underlying tensions persist, culminating in the Second Kappel War of 1531. In the decisive battle at Kappel, the Zurich Protestant army faces defeat, and Zwingli himself falls on the battlefield. The subsequent peace treaty enshrines the principle of whose realm, his religion, a concept that allows each canton to determine its own faith while granting equal rights to both confessions in jointly held territories. Meanwhile, in Geneva, not part of the Confederation but a crucial ally, another great reformer, John Calvin, emerges. Calvin establishes a theological system distinct from Lutheranism and Zwinglianism, emphasizing predestination and stringent church discipline. Geneva evolves into a Protestant Rome, a center for the spread of Calvinism across Europe. The Reformation profoundly impacts Swiss society. In Protestant cantons, literacy rates soar as individuals are encouraged to read the Bible for themselves. This cultural shift fosters educational advancements, leading to the creation of new schools and academies. However, this growth comes with a heightened moral scrutiny. Consistories and church courts vigilantly monitor citizens' behavior, penalizing vices such as excessive drinking, gambling, and marital infidelity. Economically, Protestant cantons, particularly Zurich and Basel, experience significant growth as new industries emerge, including silk production, clockmaking, and banking. In contrast, the Catholic cantons, with their more conservative outlook, largely retain traditional agriculture and the export of mercenaries for foreign service. Despite the religious divide, the Swiss managed to maintain their alliance. The Landsgemeinde, a general assembly of cantons, continues to function, albeit often struggling to reach unanimous decisions on vital issues. The federal army remains unformed, with each canton maintaining its own militia. By 1538, the Confederation officially adopts the name Switzerland, derived from the canton of Schwyz, which played a significant role in the fight for independence. Prior to this, the alliance was commonly referred to simply as the Confederation, or Allies. The period between the 17th and 18th centuries marks an era of relative stability for Switzerland. The Confederation remains uninvolved in European wars, focusing instead on economic, cultural, and scientific development. Rural areas predominantly engage in subsistence agriculture, while urban centers see the rise of crafts and manufactories. The watchmaking industry, which originated in Geneva during the 16th century, flourishes in the Jura Mountains as Swiss watchmakers craft intricate mechanisms that gain popularity throughout Europe. The textile industry also thrives, particularly in Zurich and St. Gallen, producing cotton, linen, and silk fabrics. Politically, the cantons witness a rise in oligarchic tendencies. In urban cantons, power becomes concentrated in the hands of a few patrician families, while in rural areas, wealthy peasants dominate governance. Ordinary citizens find themselves increasingly excluded from political decision-making, leading to dissatisfaction and periodic uprisings that are often brutally suppressed. This was the state of affairs in Switzerland by the end of the 18th century, a time when the ideas of the French Revolution, liberty, equality, brotherhood, begin to resonate with the progressive Swiss intelligentsia and the oppressed segments of the population. In some cantons, particularly in Vaud, unrest and calls for reform spark discontent. In 1798, French troops under General Brune invade Switzerland, ostensibly to support the revolutionary movement. The resistance proves to be weak and fragmented. The old confederation collapses, giving way to the Helvetic Republic, a unitary state modeled after France. The Helvetic Republic introduces a constitution that guarantees civil rights and freedoms, abolishes feudal privileges, and establishes a unified currency, along with standardized measures and weights. The country is divided into 19 departments, replacing the previous cantons, and universal suffrage for men is introduced, albeit with property qualifications. However, these radical reforms, particularly the move towards centralization, meet with fierce resistance, especially from the traditionally autonomous mountain cantons. In 1799, an uprising against French occupation and the New Order erupts in central Switzerland. Napoleon Bonaparte, now in power in France, recognizes that a unitary model does not suit Switzerland's historical, linguistic, and religious diversities. In 1803, he issues the Act of Mediation, restoring the federal structure while retaining many progressive reforms from the Helvetic Republic. According to the Act of Mediation, Switzerland consists of 19 cantons, with 6 new ones: St. Gallen, Graubünden, Aargau, Thurgau, Ticino, and Vaud, added to the 13 old cantons. Each canton possesses its own constitution and government, while overarching matters are managed by a federal assembly, chaired in rotation by representatives of the 6 largest cantons. Though Switzerland is formally independent, it remains effectively a satellite of Napoleonic France, supplying troops to the French army, reaching up to 16,000 soldiers, and participating in the continental blockade against England while allowing French troops to pass through its territory. Following Napoleon's defeat and the Congress of Vienna, Switzerland emerges from this tumultuous period with its identity and sovereignty reshaped, yet enduring the legacies of the transformations that defined its path through history. What if I told you that the fate of a nation could be determined by a matter of weeks, or even days? What if the principles of neutrality that Switzerland has maintained for centuries were born out of conflict rather than peace? And what if the likes of Henri Dunant, a Swiss national, could change the course of humanitarian assistance forever? In 1815, Switzerland underwent a significant transformation with the signing of the Federal Pact, which reinstated many pre-revolutionary structures. The autonomy of the cantons was enhanced, democratic liberties were curtailed, and certain feudal privileges were restored. This period also saw the addition of 3 new cantons: Valais, Neuchâtel, and Geneva, bringing the total to 22 cantons. The major European powers, recognizing the strategic importance of Switzerland, guaranteed its perpetual neutrality, a cornerstone of its foreign policy that continues to this day. Between 1815 and 1830, a time known as the Restoration, power dynamics shifted significantly. The ruling elite, particularly the patricians in the cities and landowners in the rural areas, regained control in most cantons. A notable event occurred in 1847 when the Federal Diet declared the Sonderbund, a Catholic alliance of cantons, illegal and demanded its dissolution. When the Catholic cantons refused to comply, a civil war erupted. This conflict, though lasting only 26 days and resulting in fewer than 100 casualties, proved pivotal for Switzerland. The federal forces, under General Henri Dufour, emerged victorious, leading to profound political changes enshrined in the new Constitution of 1848. The Constitution of 1848 transformed Switzerland from a loose confederation of states into a federal state with a strong central government. New federal institutions were established, including a bicameral parliament comprising a national council and a council of cantons. A federal council was created, acting as a collective executive with 7 members, alongside a federal court. This era also witnessed the introduction of a unified currency, a standardized postal system, and the removal of internal customs barriers, while maintaining substantial cantonal autonomy in education, culture, policing, and local governance. Civil rights and freedoms were guaranteed, ensuring equality before the law and freedom of religion. The latter half of the 19th century marked a period of modernization and industrialization for Switzerland. The construction of railways connected major cities and traversed the Alpine passes, with the St. Gothard Railway Tunnel, completed in 1882, linking Switzerland directly to Italy. The development of various industries flourished. Mechanical engineering, chemicals, food production, and textiles boomed. Switzerland emerged as a pioneer in electrification. In 1886, the first hydroelectric power station in Europe was built in Schaffhausen. Alongside this industrial growth, tourism blossomed, drawing wealthy Europeans and Americans to its breathtaking mountain landscapes, pristine air, and therapeutic hot springs. Luxurious hotels were erected, and winter sports gained a foothold. In 1874, a new federal constitution was adopted, expanding both citizens' rights and the federal government's powers. Elements of direct democracy were introduced, allowing referendums and enabling citizens to vote directly on laws passed by Parliament. By 1891, the popular initiative allowed citizens to propose amendments to the Constitution. That same year, in Geneva, the Universal Postal Union was established, one of the first international organizations, solidifying Switzerland's role on the global stage. Henri Dunant, profoundly affected by the suffering of soldiers during the Battle of Solferino, founded the International Committee of the Red Cross in 1863. This organization aimed to provide aid to victims of armed conflict irrespective of their nationality. Switzerland's neutral stance during the Franco-Prussian War from 1870 to 1871 allowed it to accommodate a disarmed French army led by General Bourbaki, harboring around 87,000 soldiers on its soil. The early 20th century heralded a time of economic growth and social reforms for Switzerland. The chemical industry flourished, particularly in Basel, where companies emerged to become global leaders. The watchmaking industry transitioned from artisanal production to factory manufacturing, all while maintaining exceptional quality. Banking developed in Geneva and Zurich, attracting capital from around the world. In 1912, state insurance against illness and accidents was introduced, and the following year saw regulations limiting the workday in factories, along with improved labor conditions for women and children. The First World War tested Swiss neutrality like never before. The country mobilized around 250,000 soldiers to defend its borders, appointing General Ulrich Wille as the commander-in-chief of the Swiss army. Throughout the war, Switzerland became a refuge for political exiles, deserters, and pacifists from across Europe. Notable figures such as Vladimir Lenin found asylum in Zurich, while Romain Rolland took refuge in Geneva and James Joyce in Bern. Although Switzerland did not engage in combat, the war had a profound impact on its economy, disrupting trade links, causing food and raw material shortages, and leading to inflation. Social tensions escalated, culminating in a general strike in November 1918, Switzerland's most significant social conflict to date. Approximately 250,000 workers participated in the strike, which lasted 3 days and concluded with a compromise. The government pledged to implement social reforms, including a 48-hour work week and proportional representation in elections. However, more radical demands from the strikers, such as the resignation of the government or the establishment of a workers' militia, went unaddressed. Following the First World War, Switzerland joined the League of Nations, with its headquarters established in Geneva. This marked the first instance of Switzerland participating in an international political organization, representing a departure from its long-standing policy of isolationism. As we explore this extraordinary journey of transformation, the story of Switzerland illustrates how adversity can cultivate resilience and redefine a nation's identity on the global stage.